Hello, and welcome. This is the final outcome of the two-part series, CHEFMATE50, a serial killer on the loose. This is Detective Debbie Harris. Let me rewind. We had 3 people missing from 2012, all from the LGBT+ community. They were perhaps victims of cannibalism. I had a suspicion, but ended up not being our guy. We had no more leads in the case, and the crew had to be dissolved. A couple of years later, I received a call from Detective Charles Coffey. I could tell he was concerned. 5 seconds into our conversation, he says, "It's happened again. 2 more males are missing, and it's similar to the disappearance of our first 3 missing individuals." Toronto police are calling the disappearances of Andrewkinsman and Salem Essen suspicious. Their disappearances follow several unsolved missing persons cases going back to 2010. It was concerning that there was someone out there butchering and eating people. Andrewkinsman was 6'4" and 230 pounds. If somebody like that can get taken, no one is really safe. A new crew was being formed. It was like getting a second chance. For the last 3 years, this case had been a burden, so now we could actually finish what we started. I really wanted to join, but I retired from service, and I had a good paying job in another field. I was disappointed, but when I saw that Detective Dave Dickinson would be overseeing the case, I was thrilled because I knew how reliable Dave is. He thinks outside the box and is clever in his analyses, which is a case that required that. Detective Dave Dickinson testimony. I had been at homicide for 5 years, and this was the very first time that I was assigned to lead a missing person case. I started from scratch, checking every case in the area. Salem and Andrew were both gay. They were both in their mid-30s, and they both vanished from the village, just like earlier disappearances. Salem had no set address, he was homeless, so it was hard to get started. But Kinsman was last seen at his home, so we needed to go and search for anything that would help us comprehend where Andrew might have gone. It was weird being at the apartment, knowing that he's vanished. The kitchen shelves were all well stocked. It didn't seem like he was intending on going anywhere. I located his computer room. There was a container of old discs against the wall, and just above it was a calendar. It was set in June. On the 26th, the day that Andrew went missing, a note was written. It said, 3 p.m. And then, below was the name, Bruce. We had to know who this individual was. I noticed 3 watch cameras in front of Andrewkinsman's residence. 1 across the street, and then 2 others on the sides. I recovered the video footage that the first detectives had obtained. On the day that Andrewkinsman vanished, he was meeting a guy named Bruce, so I began reviewing the video earlier. At around 2:45 p.m. The only thing I could notice was a red Dodge across the street. At 3:07 p.m., a person leaves Kinsman's home. Andrewkinsman was a tall dude. He was around 6'4", and you could catch that this man towered over the van in the tape. I think that man on the footage was Andrewkinsman. The van moves, going eastbound. I really needed to see who the driver of the van was. The vehicle ended up being a 2004 Dodge Caravan. I was shocked. We had the same year, make, and model. We needed to know who the owner was. After requesting records for all the red 2004 Dodge Caravans in the province of Ontario, I concluded with 6,181 outcomes. We had the connection of Andrew and Bruce, so subsequent, I searched for the name Bruce. The initial list of 6,000 was reduced to 5. I started examining the background of every single one of them. 4 of them, and nothing. But then, I came to a Bruce MacArthur. A 66-year-old who recently had an absolution for a conviction acquired in 2003, where he attacked another male with a metal pipe. In the summer of 2016, MacArthur had been implicated in a violent meeting with another fellow in the backseat of his 2004 Dodge Caravan. We feel this is the same Dodge Caravan seen in the video in which Andrewkinsman vanished. Surveillance was put on Bruce MacArthur to follow his whereabouts. When I came into the office and talked to the crew about Bruce MacArthur, Josh instantly started snapping his fingers. I questioned the guy back in 2013. He replied. He even volunteered to help investigate the 3 missing men from the village. He had met Skander via a friend and had dated Majid at some point. He was very honest with his statement. There was simply no logic to believe there was anything more than him helping out with the case. It's incredible that this situation has gone on so long unsolved. It's just disturbing and scary. Who's next? We don't have any leads. Through video surveillance, we discovered MacArthur was a landscaper. He managed many properties in Midtown Toronto and serviced high-end residents. Are we assuming this man may be accountable for Andrewkinsman's killing? I thought. I checked to see if a video of Bruce MacArthur with Andrewkinsman, possibly back at his home address, existed, and it did. I started looking on June 26th, the day Andrewkinsman disappeared. Regarding the video, it was extremely frustrating. Part of it had already been erased and written over. I began watching the video and recognized the parking spot that Bruce MacArthur parked at. I also noticed a pattern. At the same exact time, every day, MacArthur would depart in the morning and come home in the evening. Then on August 17th, I see Bruce MacArthur leaving the complex in the Dodge Caravan, and it doesn't come back that day. The next day, he comes back, driving another van. I was thinking inside, well, where is the old van? What the hell is going on here? We had to do everything in our power to find the vehicle. At that point, I had a partner that I was working with. Josh is definitely more mild-mannered in comparison to me. I'm more of a straight shooter, and I don't take much crap from people. We thought Bruce MacArthur had likely scrapped his old van. So, we came up with an action plan. We searched on a map and found all the auto wreckers in the area. Josh and I decided to pay a visit to every single one of them. Once at the 4th wrecking yard, which is just lane after lane of wrecked cars as far as the eye can see, all of a sudden, my partner screamed at me, "It's here, we found it." The trunk of the vehicle was open, and the tires were missing, but, other than that, the van was completely intact. There were stains on the mat, on the inside. I immediately said, "Nobody is touching this van. We have to seal this up," I thought. I was hoping that we would discover DNA evidence that we could place Andrewkinsman in the van. It would be a huge step forward in the case. My phone rang. It was our biologist for the Center of Forensic Science. She informed me they had obtained Andrewkinsman's DNA in the blood which was inside the vehicle. Now, we can say for sure that he got into Bruce MacArthur's van. But the blood was perhaps the size of a pinky nail. It would have been easily explainable. Maybe he cut himself. It just wasn't enough evidence to put away Bruce MacArthur for the killing of Andrewkinsman. We thought, how do we get further evidence connecting Bruce MacArthur to any of the missing men? Either his phone or on his computer, we thought. We looked at his cell phone, and he had it with him all the time, so we thought, okay, let's try to see what's on his hard drive. I obtained a warrant to get into his flat when he was at work. We also had placed a GPS tracking device on his car to track his movements at all times. I headed to the control center, where I set up and waited for Bruce to leave his residence next. On my computer, I saw Bruce MacArthur's vehicle begin to move. I hoped that he would continue far out of Toronto, then we wouldn't have to worry about him. Just a few miles away from his house, he came to a stop. We didn't know how long he would be at this location, but I knew this was our chance to get in, and try to collect evidence. I watched the crew making their way through the lobby of the building and up the elevators. The first thing I did was take lots of photos. I made sure to put everything back the exact way I had found it when we left the flat. Then, I gave the okay to go ahead and clone his computer. Patrick notified me they would likely need at least 3 to 3.5 hours to clone the entire computer. I searched through Bruce MacArthur's room, and I noticed a rope. I also saw gloves, a tape, and a metal bar. It could have been a murder kit, or a bondage kit, as far as I know. I took a shot, and took some objects out to check them for DNA. I was pacing in the room, overlooking the tracker, and after an hour, Bruce MacArthur began driving back in the direction of his home. I immediately informed the unit inside the building, "You have to go." Everything was frantic at that point. While the crime detectives were disconnecting all their gadgets from the computer, I went through my photos to try and put everything back in its place. I'm watching Bruce MacArthur go down the Don Valley Parkway. He's getting closer and closer to his home, and I'm thinking, we'll get caught for sure. We were able to escape just as Bruce MacArthur was 2 minutes away. Back at the station, I opened the file. There were recent history, chats, emails, and a myriad of diverse images. But there was nothing that stood out. Then I found metadata showing a vast amount of images had been deleted recently. It was weird. The process of recovering these images, it's incredibly frustrating. I would be getting 2 or 3 hours of sleep every day. I was digging for weeks and nothing. There's been no trace of Kinsman since his disappearance. And there was also another man, Salem Essen, who disappeared back in April. Friends and loved ones have conducted several searches across the city. So far, no trace. Even though I wasn't part of the case anymore, I was paying close attention to the news. I was waiting in suspense of what would happen next, and if they would someday get some closure for these families. You go to bed, and wake up thinking about them. It's a real struggle. After days of going through data, my colleague called and said, "Charles, I think I found pictures of what seemed to be a dead man." I immediately drove into work, and checked the photos that were retrieved. There was Salem Essen, who had vanished a few months before Andrewkinsman. The way he was posed, and his body was placed, you could see that he was deceased. To witness this, was heart-wrenching. You could appreciate Bruce MacArthur's room and the headboard that was unique to his bed. There was also a metal pipe, and it seemed that it was employed to tighten the ligature around Salem's neck, cutting off oxygen and eventually killing him. I was holding that bar, and seeing now that this metal bar is somehow involved in the murder was creepy. As the day goes on, we start uncovering pictures of other killed men. Many of them were just wearing fur coats. There were men who we had no idea had been missing. It's scary. I was getting ready for arrest warrants, and I got a call from the unit surveilling Bruce MacArthur. He had just picked up a guy and was heading back to his address. I drove very quickly to that location. My investigators informed me that Bruce MacArthur had already made his way to the 19th floor. I went inside MacArthur's complex along with Dave. I remember all the elevators except one were out of service. We kept hitting the button. My adrenaline was up to the roof. The elevator finally opened, and it was crowded. My heart was pounding, and the elevator was stopping on every floor. I didn't want anyone dying on my watch. Finally, we got to the 19th floor. I knocked on the door. Silence. Then we heard a soft, "Hello? Who's there?" I caught Bruce MacArthur by his wrists and put my handcuffs on him. I tell Bruce that I'm placing him under arrest for first-degree murder. I walked towards Bruce MacArthur's bedroom. He had handcuffed the male to his bed and had put a towel over his head. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This individual was going to become Bruce MacArthur's next victim. We then searched his van. A fur coat was located in the storage area. It was the same fur coat that I had seen victims wearing in the pictures we had retrieved from the computer. A metal pipe was also found underneath the driver's seat. The same pipe we had noticed in his flat that he had used to strangle his victims. Bruce MacArthur was taken down to the station. I had the murder weapon, but I didn't know where the bodies were. I really wanted to have my shot at him. I threw down photos of the slaughtered men. I said to him, "Tell me who this person is. Tell me where I can find them." He just did not answer. If you've done something with them that I'll never be able to locate them, at least tell me that, so I can go and inform the families. He just sat there. We knew Bruce managed properties that backed onto woods. I thought if Bruce was going to get rid of a body, that would be a perfect spot. Mallory Crescent was a property Bruce frequented daily and kept his equipment there. My partner had the K9 unit come by and search the yard. The dogs were just sniffing around it, looking up at the handler, and kept focusing on this planter. When the planter was opened, I didn't want to believe my eyes. You could see the soil layers, and then you'd notice a bone sticking out. Then you'd see more layers, and then you'd see a foot. It was disturbing to say the least. You'd see more layers, and then there'd be a skull. The decomposing remains of 6 individuals have been retrieved from planters taken from this home on Mallory Crescent. Andrewkinsman is the only one of the 6 whose body parts authorities have been able to identify so far positively. And with backyard excavation on areas they've identified, there will probably be more victims. Bruce MacArthur worked in the same area where I lived. That made me feel sick to my stomach. Simply because the individual that may be responsible for the killings of all of these men could have been right under my nose the whole time. We ultimately identified all the males that Bruce MacArthur had pictures of on his computer. Sarosh Mahmoudi was declared missing, but there was no news about what happened to him. Dean Lysawick was surviving in the shelter system in the GTA. Dean was never reported missing. It was disheartening. I felt for families and friends of everyone who'd been looking for these people all these years. MacArthur's victims came to Toronto in the pursuit of a new life. They attempted to live life to the fullest, and Bruce MacArthur stole that from them. I remember clearly. I was in the first row. And just hearing the word, guilty, over and over again, was a wonderful feeling. We, unfortunately, can never bring these men back, but I'm hoping we can begin bringing some closure to the families and the communities. Bruce MacArthur is guilty. I'm not considering it a win. It's just the right outcome. I was the one that started this, and I can now close that door. The feelings were overwhelming. I was proud of the crew. Overall, I was grateful that the families ultimately had closure. There were no words that could explain the feeling of relief to know that no more men would go missing in the future.